And we're live. Greetings and good evening, good night. Welcome back once again. This is the voice of one and only Emunah Yesra else. And we're live. Oh, wait a minute. Greetings and good evening, good night. Welcome back once again. This is the voice of one and only Emunah Yesra else. Don't you just love the feedback? When you try to open, it doesn't let you pause it until you start it, and then it feeds back. But it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Greetings and welcome back once again. You know, I'm pushing through. Let's just say that I'm pushing through. This is the LEV project. As always, we invite those to read. We don't get many readers, and so it's just been really busy on this end. We're still on Olaudah Equiano. It's all good. I'm just gonna go at the pace that I can. This is a marathon, 12-month marathon. Be coming up to our 12th month, the beginning of our 12th month in about 2 weeks. So just gonna continue to take our time and make our way through, and hopefully get a little burst of energy on the end part of this. And so I'm gonna read. Last time we saw Olaudah, he was taken back into slavery, and the links are in the box. This is section 8. He ended up back in Montserrat, which is a small Caribbean island close to Barbados in that region there. And so he was talking about what is it he experienced in getting back into slavery. So we are on portion number 8 of chapter 5. And so I'll start there. He says, while I was in Montserrat, remember they sold him back and he thought he was going to have a hard life, but they sold him to a man who is kind of giving him a bly as it respects to not beating him, treating him terribly bad. So he says, while I was in Montserrat, I knew a Negro man, one Emmanuel Sankey, who endeavored to escape from his miserable bondage by the concealing of himself on board of a London ship. But fate did not favor the poor oppressed man, for being discovered when the vessel was under sail, he was delivered up again to his master. This Christian master immediately pinned the wretch to the ground at each wrist and ankle, and then took some sticks of sealing wax, lighted them, and dropped it all over his back. This was another master noted for cruelty. I believe he had not a slave, but had been cut and pieces fairly taken out of the flesh. And after they had been punished thus, he used to make them get into a long wooden box or case he had for that purpose, and shut them up during pleasure. It was just about the height and breadth of man, and poor wretches had no room when in the case to move. So torturing someone who's running away from your cruelty, that's not anywhere. They like to say, well, hey, good evening, big girl. What's going on? Good evening, Sister Angel. People like to say, oh, it's in the Bible. The Bible doesn't give you license to torture your quote unquote bondservant in this way. It was very common in several of the islands, particularly in St. Kitts, for the slaves to be branded with the initials of their master's name, and a load of heavy iron hooks hung about their necks. Indeed, on the most trivial occasions, they were loaded with chains, and often instruments of torture were added. The iron muzzle, thumb screws, etc., are so well known as not to need a description, and were sometimes applied to the fullest faults. I have seen a Negro beaten till some of his bones were broken for only letting a pot boil over. It is not uncommon after a flogging to make slaves go to their knees and thank their owners and pray, or rather say, God bless you. I have often asked many of men slaves who used to go general miles to their wives and late in the night, after having been wearied with a hard day's labor, why they went so far for wives and did not take them of their own masters' Negro women, and particularly those who lived together as household slaves. Their answers have ever been, because when the master or mistress choose to punish the women, they make the husbands flog their own wives, and that we could not bear to do. It is surprising such uses should drive the poor creatures to despair, and make them seek a refuge in death from those evils which rendered their lives intolerable Wow, and I think that's something interesting that he asked that question and received this answer, because even in the Americas, you see what they call abroad marriages, and this is the first time I'm actually, or other than the fact that some of the people on the plantation were your relatives, but this is the first time I'm hearing a rationale that uh, so as not to bear when there's any torture that's going to come about, they made sure to pick someone who was not in their immediate vicinity. Is deep, but I find that interesting. Let's keep going. With shuddering horror pale and eyes aghast, they view their lamentable lot and find no rest. This they frequently do. And I notice how he says they, he's using these descriptive terms, but he's not including himself, which is interesting. This they frequently do, a Negro man on board a vessel of my master's. So he called the fellow Negroes they, and then his master, he uses a possessive pronoun as mine. My masters, while I belong to her, have been put in irons for some trifling misdemeanor, and kept in that state some days, being wearied of life, took on an opportunity of jumping overboard into the sea. However, he was picked up without being drowned. Another, whose life was also a burden to him, resolved to starve himself to death, and refused to eat of any victuals. This procured him a severe flogging, and he also on first occasion that offered jumped overboard at Charlestown, but he was saved. Nor is there any greater reward shown to the little property than there is to the persons and lives of the Negroes. I have already related an instance or two of particular oppression, out of many which I have witnessed, but the following is frequent in all the islands. The wretched field slaves, after toiling all the day for an unfeeling owner, who gives them but little victuals, steals a few moments from rest or refreshment to gather some small portions of grass, according as their time will admit. This they will commonly tie up in a parcel, either a bit worth sixpence or half a bit's worth, and bring it to town or to the market to sell. Nothing is more common than for white people on this occasion to take the grass from them without paying for it. And not only so, but too often also, to my knowledge, our clerks and many others at the same time have committed acts of violence on the poor, wretched, and helpless females, whom I have seen for hours stand crying to no purpose, and get no redress or pay any kind. Is not this one common and crying sin enough to bring down God's judgment on the islands? He tells us the oppressor and the oppressed are both in his hands, and as these are not the poor, the brokenhearted, the blind, the captive, the bruised, of which our Savior speaks, who are they? He asks the question. One of these depredators, once in St. Eustachia, never heard of that island. Let me go ahead and open. Came on board of our vessel and brought some fowls and pigs of meat. And a whole day after his departure with the kind, he returned and wanted his money back. I refused to give it, and he, not seeing my captain on board, began the common pranks with me and swore he would even break open my chest and take my money. I therefore expected, as my captain was absent, that he would be as good as his word, and he was just proceeded to strike me, when fortunately a British seaman on board, whose heart had not been debauched by a West India climate, interposed and prevented him. But had the cruel man struck me, I certainly should have defended myself at the hazard of my life. For what is life to a man thus oppressed? He went away, however, swearing and threatening that whenever he caught me ashore, he would shoot me and pay for me afterwards. So we're getting a taste of, we've been leading a lot of American narratives, but we're getting a taste of island life, which is pretty much the same, because it's pretty much the same people. So we shall proceed. Chapter 9. What's this? Segment 9, paragraph 9, section 9, or something 9 of chapter 5. The small amount in which the life of a Negro is held in the West Indies is so universally known that it might seem impertinent to quote the following extract if some people had not been hardly enough of late to assert that Negroes are on the same footing in the respect as Europeans. But by the 329th Act, page 125 of the Assembly of Barbados, it is enacted that if any Negro or other slave under punishment by his master or his order for running away or any other crime or misdemeanor towards his said master, unfortunately shall suffer in life or member, no person whatsoever shall be liable to a fine. But if any man shall out of wantonness or only bloody mindedness or cruel intention willfully kill a Negro or other slave of his own, he shall pay into the public treasury 15 pounds sterling. Wow. And it is the same in most, if not all, the West India islands. Is not this one of many acts of island which call loudly for redress? And do not the assembly which enacted it deserve the appellation of savages and brutes rather than Christians and men? Is it an act of once unmerciful, unjust, and unwise, which for cruelty would disgrace an assembly of those who are called barbarians? And for its injustice and insanity would shock the morality and common sense of, what is this, Semaid or Hentatote? He goes on to say, shocking as this and many other acts of bloody West India code at first view appear, how is the iniquity of it heightened when we consider to whom it may be extended? Mr. James Tobin, a zealous laborer in a vineyard of slavery, gives an account of a French planter of his acquaintance in the island of Martinico, who showed him many mulattoes working in the field like beasts of burden. And he told Mr. Tobin, these were all the produce of his own loins, and I myself have known similar instances. Pray, reader, are these sons and daughters of French planters less his children being begotten of black women? And what must be the virtue of these or those legislators, and the feelings of those fathers who estates the lives of their sons, however begotten, at no more than 15 pounds? Though they be murdered, as the act says, out of wantonness and bloody mindedness, but is not the slave trade entirely a war with the heart of men? And surely that which is begun by breaking down the barriers of virtue involves it in continuous destruction to every principle and buries all sentiments in ruin. I have often seen slaves, particularly those who were meager in different islands, put into scales and weighed, and then sold for 3 pences to 6 pences or 9 pence a pound. Wow, they were selling you by the pound. I can't right now. Wow. My master, however, whose humanity was shocked at this mode, used to sell such by the lump, and at or after sale, even those Negroes born in the islands, it is not uncommon to see taken from their wives, and wives from their husbands, and children from their parents, and sent off to other islands, and wherever else their merciless lords chose. Again, it's the same thing. It's just the only difference is just the continent of North America. It was state lines, but they were sold across water from one island to the next. Sold by the pound. Sold by the pound. Yes, Sister Angel, that's wild. It says, oftentimes my heart has bled at these partings which these friends of the departed have been at the waterside with sighs and tears, have kept their eyes fixed on the vessel till it went out of sight. A poor Creole Negro I know well, who after having been often thus transported from island to island, at last resided in Montserrat. This man used to tell me many melancholy tales of himself. Generally, after he had done working for his master, he used to employ his few leisure moments to go fishing. When he had caught any fish, his master would frequently take them from him without paying him, and at other times some other white people would serve him in the same manner. And then they say, don't steal, and then you steal, right? One day he said to me very movingly, sometimes when a white man take away my fish, I go to my master and he get me my right. And when my master by strength take away my fishes, what me must do? I can't go to nobody to be righted. Then said the poor man, look up above. I must look up to God Almighty in the top from right. This artless tale moved me much, and I could not help feeling the just cause Moses had in redressing his brother against the Egyptian. I exhorted the man to look up to God, or to the Most High in the top, since there was no redress below. Though I little thought then that I myself should more than once experience such imposition and need the same exhortation hereafter in my own transaction in the islands, and that even this poor man and I should sometime after suffer together in the same manner as be related hereafter. And now we're up to chapter 5, section 10. Nor was such usage as his confined to particular places or individuals. For in all different islands in which I have been, and I have visited no less than 15, the treatment of slaves were nearly the same. So nearly indeed that the history of an island or even a plantation with a few such expectations as I have mentioned might serve for a history of the whole. Such a tendency has the slave trade to debauch men's minds and harden them to every feeling of humanity. For I will not suppose that the dealers in slaves are born worse than other men. No, it is the fatality of this mistaken avarice that it corrupts the milk of human kindness and turns it into gall. And had the pursuits of those men been different, they might have been as generous, as tender-hearted and just as they are unfeeling, rapacious, and cruel. Surely this traffic cannot be good which spreads like a pestilence and taints what it touches, which violates that first natural right of mankind, equality and independence, gives one man dominion over his fellows, which God could never intend. For it raises the owner to a state as far above a man as it depresses the slave below it. And with the presumption of human pride sets distinction between them, immeasurable intent and endless in duration. Yet how mistaken is the avarice even of the planters? Are slaves more useful by being thus humbled to the condition of brutes than they would be if suffered to enjoy the privileges of men? The freedom which diffuses health and prosperity throughout Britain answers you no. When you make men slaves, you deprive them of half their virtue. You set them in your own conduct an example of fraud, rapine, and cruelty, and compel them to live with you in a state of war. And yet you complain that you are not honest or faithful. That they are not honest or faithful. You stupefy them with stripes and think it necessary to keep them in a state of ignorance. And yet you assert they are incapable of learning, that their minds are such barren soil or more that culture would be lost on them. And they came from a climate where nature, though prodigal of her boundaries in a degree unknown to yourselves, has left man alone scant and unfinished, and incapable of enjoying the treasures she hath poured out for him. An assertion at once impious and absurd. Why do you use those instruments to torture? Are they fit to be applied by one rational being to another? And are you not struck with shame and mortification to see the partakers of your nature reduced so low? But above all, are there no dangers attending this mode of treatment? Are you not hourly in dread of an insurrection? Nor would it be surprised for when, and he's doing a poem now, no peace is given to us enslaved, but custody severe, and stripes and arbitrary punishment inflicted. What peace can we return, but to our power hostility and hate, untamed reluctance and revenge, thou slow, yet ever plotting how the conqueror least may reap his conquest and may least rejoice in doing what we most in suffering feel. And that's a poem by somebody named Milton. It goes on to say, but by changing your conduct and treating your slaves as men, every cause of fear would be banished. They would be faithful, honest, and intelligent, and vigorous, and peace and prosperity and happiness would attend them. That's the end of. And I believe he began to speak in England. So this is retrospectively, if I understand correctly, he's speaking to those in that sphere of abolition to prick the conscience of what it is that they're doing in these spaces. So I'm going to continue on chapter Did I say? Yeah, chapter 6. Chapter 6. Some account of Brimstone Hill in Montserrat. The author, surprised by 2 earthquakes, favorably changed in the author's situation. He commences merchants with 3 pence. His various success in dealings in the different islands in America, and the imposition of meats with his transaction with white people. A curious imposition on human nature, danger of the serfs in the West Indies, remarkable instance of kidnapping of free mulatto. The author is nearly murdered by Dr. Perkins in Savannah. So we're going to continue. That was the preface. Section 1. In the preceding chapter, I have set before the reader a few of those many instances of oppression, extortion, and cruelty to which I have been a witness in the West Indies, but were I to enumerate them all, the catalogue would be tedious and disgusting. The punishment of the slaves on every trifling occasion are so frequent and so well known, together with the different instruments with which they are tortured, that it cannot any longer afford novelty to recite them, and they are too shocking to yield delight either to the writer or the reader. I shall therefore hereafter only mention such as incidentally befell myself in the course of my adventures. In the variety of departments in which I was deployed by my master, I had an opportunity of seeing many curious scenes in different islands, but above all I was struck with a celebrated curiosity called Brimstone Hill, which is a high and steep mountain some few miles from the town of Plymouth in Montserrat. I had often heard of some wonders that were to be seen on this hill, and I went once with some white and black people to visit. When we arrived at the top, I saw under different cliffs great flakes of brimstone, occasioned by the streams of various little ponds, which were then boiling naturally in the earth. So a geyser, I suppose. Some of these ponds were white as milk, some quite blue, and others different colors. I had taken some potatoes with me, and I put them in different ponds, and in a few minutes they were well boiled. I tasted some of them, but they were very sulphurous, and the silver shoe buckles and all other things we had among us of metal were in a little time turned as black as lead. Whilst I was in the island one night, I felt a strange sensation of being told I fell asleep. As I was sleeping on a large chest, I felt the whole building shake in an uncommon and astonishing manner, so much that it shook me off the chest where I lay then. I was exceedingly frightened and thought it was the visitation of spirits. It threw me into such a tremor as is not to be described. I instantly covered my head all over as I lay, and did not know what to think or do. In this consternation, a gentleman who lay in the next room just by me came out, and I was glad to hear him, and made a sham cough, and he asked me if I felt the earthquake. I told him I was shaken off the chest where I lay, but did not know what occasioned it, and he told me it was an earthquake, and it shook him out of his bed. On hearing this, I became easy in my mind. At another time, a circumstance of this kind happened, when I was on board a vessel in Montserrat Road at midnight, as we were asleep, and it shook the vessel in the most unaccountable manner imaginable. And to me it seemed as when a vessel or a boat runs on gravel, as near as I can describe it. Many things on board were moved out of their places, but happily no damage was done. So that's something to research. He's saying the space in Montserrat must be on a fault line or have some kind of underwater activity going on. We are in chapter 6, section 2. You can follow along. And if you desire to read, just go ahead and put it in the box, and we can do that as well. About the end of the year 1963, sorry, I said 1963. About the end of the year 1763, kind providence seemed to be rather more favorable to me. One of my master's vessels, a Bermuda sloop about 60 tons burden, was commanded by one Captain Thomas Farmer, an Englishman, a very alert and active man who gained my master a great deal of money by his good management in carrying passengers from one island to another. But very often his sailors used to get drunk and run away from the vessel, which hindered him in his business very much. This man had taken a liking to me, and my different times begged of my master to let me go a trip with him as a sailor, but he would tell him he could not spare me, though the vessel sometimes could not go for want of hands. For sailors were generally very scarce in the island. However, at last, from necessity or force, my master was prevailed on, though very reluctant to let me go with the captain, but he gave him great charge to take care that I did not run away, for if I did, he would make him pay for me. This being the case, the captain had for some time a sharp eye upon me whenever the vessel anchored, and as soon as she returned, I went for on shore again. Thus I was slaving, as it were, for life, sometimes at one thing and sometimes at another, so that the captain and I were nearly the most useful men in my master's employment. I also became so useful to the captain on shipboard that many times, when he used to ask for me to go with him, though it should be about for 24 hours to some of the islands near us, my master would answer he could not spare me. Hold on one second. Okay. He could not spare me. At which the captain would swear and not go to the trip and tell my master that I was better to him on board than any 3 white men he had, for they used to behave ill in many respects, particularly in getting drunk. And then they frequently got the boat stove so as to hinder the vessel from coming back so soon as she might have done. This my master knew very well, and at last, by the captain's constant entreaties, after I had been several times with him, one day, to my great joy, told me that the captain would not let him rest, and asked whether I would go aboard as a sailor, or stay on shore and mind the stores, for he could not bear any longer to be plagued in this manner. I was very happy at this proposal, for I immediately thought I might in time stand a chance by being on board to get a little money, or possibly make my escape if I should be used ill. I also expected to get better food and in great abundance, for I oftentimes felt much hunger, though my master treated his slaves, as I have observed, uncommonly well. I therefore, without hesitation, answered him that I would go and be a sailor if he pleased. Accordingly, I was ordered on board directly. Nevertheless, between the vessel and the shore, when she was in port, I had little or no rest, as my master always wished to have me along with him. Indeed, he was a very pleasant gentleman, and but for my expectations on shipboard, I should not have thought of leaving him. But the captain liked me so very much that I was entirely his right-hand man. I did all I could to deserve his favor, and in return I received better treatment from him than I believe any other in my situation ever met with in the West Indies. So again, his journey through captivity has been very strange, if you remember, unusual, like he is even attesting to himself. He's the son of a chief man. If we go back and read the beginning, and his life has been very, very, from one situation to the next. He's escaping harsh slavery. He's witnessing it, but he himself is not coming under the whip, which is very interesting. So we're in portion 3, chapter 6, portion 3. After I had been sailing for some time with this captain, at length I endeavored to try my luck and commence merchant. I had but a very small capital to begin with, for one single half bit, which is equal to 3 pence in England, made up my whole stock. However, I trusted to the Most High to be with me, and at one of our trips to St. Eustita, a Dutch island, I never heard of that island. I looked that island up. Eustatia. I bought a glass tumbler with my half bit, and when I came to Montserrat, I sold it for a bit, or 6 pence. Luckily, we made several successive trips to St. Eustatia, which was general mart for West Indies, about 20 leagues from Montserrat. In our next find is my tumbler so profitable. With this one bit, I bought 2 tumbler more, and when I came back, I sold them for 2 bits, equal to a shilling sterling. When we went again, I bought with these 2 bits 4 more of these glasses. This is a businessman. He flipping his money. He taking it, flip it, and keep increasing. Which I sold for 4 bits on our return to Montserrat. In our next voyage to St. Eustatia, I bought 2 glasses with 1 bit, and with the other 3, I bought a jug of Geneva, nearly 3 pints in measure. When we came to Montserrat, I sold the gin for 8 bits, and the tumblers for 2. so that my capital now amounted in all to $1, well husbanded and acquired in the space of a month or 6 weeks, when I blessed the Most High that I was so rich. So he hustling, babes. He hustling. Come here 1 second. Take a little bit. And I had not been long trading for myself in the manner above related, when I experienced a like trial in company with him, as follows. This man, being used to the water was upon an emergency put on board of us by his master to work as another hand on voyage to Santa Cruz. Drink a little bit. And at our sailing, he had brought his little all for venture, which consisted of 6 bits worth of limes and oranges in a bag. I had also my whole stock, about 12 bits worth of the same kind of goods, separate in 2 bags, for we had heard that these fruits were so well in that island. When we came there in some little convenient time, he and I went on shore with our fruits to sell them. But we had scarcely landed when we were met with 2 white men, who presently took our 3 bags from us. We could not at first guess what they meant to do, and for some time we thought they were jesting with us, but they soon let us know otherwise, for they took our ventures immediately to a house hard by and adjoined the fort, while we followed all the way, begging of them to give us our fruits, but in vain. They not only refused to return them, but they swore at us and threatened that if we did not immediately depart, they would flog us. So it wasn't enough. What are we? Hey, how are you doing, Dave? We are reading from Olaudah Equiano, The Life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vassa, the African. The link is in the box. You can follow along. We're currently in chapter 6, section 4. Nope, section 3. Chapter 6, section 3. And so this is what, the 5th installment of this book. And we're following along in his life. Right now he's in smaller islands within the Caribbean. He's on Montserrat, but he's sailing from island to island. And he's getting, you know, they ran up on him. Some Europeans ran up on him and stole his victuals, as they like to say. We told them those 3 bags were our all, that we brought them with us to sell, and that we came from Montserrat, and showed them the vessel. But this was rather against us, as they now saw we were strangers as well as slaves. They still therefore swore and desired us to be gone, and even took sticks to beat us. While we, seeing that they meant what they said, and went off in great confusion and despair. Thus, in the very minute of gaining more by 3 times than I ever did by a venture in my life before, was I deprived of every farthing I was worth. An insupportable misfortune. But how to help ourselves we know not. In our consternation, we went to commanding officer of the fort and told him how we had been served by some of his people, but we obtained not the least redress. And no one should save you, huh? Open the book now. All right. He answered our complaints. You're welcome. He answered our complaints only by a volley of imprecations against us, and immediately took a horsewhip in order to chastise us, so that we were obliged to turn out much faster than we came in. I then, in the agony of distress and indignation, wished the ire of God and his forked lightning might transfix these cruel oppressors among the dead. So now he was like, and this is not the first time it happened to him, where he was like, you know, they treat me good, they treat me well, but it's only because they wanted something from you. And in the end, they ended up doing him dirty, just like the ship captain out of England. We, however, returned to the house and begged and besought them again and again for our fruits, till at last some other people being in the house asked if we would be contented if they kept 1 bag and gave us other 2. We, seeing no remedy whatever, consented to this, and they observed, serving 1 bag to have both kinds of fruit in it, which belonged to my companion, kept that, and the other 2 being mine, they gave us back. As soon as I got them, I ran as fast as I could and got the first Negro man I could to help me off. My companion stayed a little longer to plead. He told them the bag they had was his, and that it was all he was worth in the world. But this was of no avail, and he was obliged to return without it. The poor man, wringing his hand, cried bitterly for his loss, and indeed He then did look up to God on high, which so moved me with pity for him that I gave him nearly 1/3 of my fruits. He then proceeded to market to sell them, and Providence was more favorable than we could have expected, for we sold our fruits uncommonly well. I got for mine about 37 bits. Such a surprising reverse of fortune in a short time seemed like a dream, and proved no small encouragement for me to trust the Lord in any situation. My captain apparently frequently used to take my part and get me my right when I had been plundered or used ill by those tender Christian depredators, among whom I have shuddered to observe the unceasing blasphemous execrations which are wantonly thrown out by persons of all ages and conditions, not only without occasion, but even as if they were indulged in pleasures. So that was it's broken up into segments. So that's chapter, if you're following along, I'm on page number 87 in my book. It's chapter 6, section 4. So let me look on this for you and see on the link. It's chapter 6, section 4. I'm gonna look on the link and see HTML file. Should be the same. Chapter 6. It's chapter 4. I'm going to tell you right now. Hold on one second. Chapter 6 starts at page 227 and section. Okay, they don't break it up in sections here, so I'm going to tell you right now. One second. For those who just joined us, this is the LEV project. Let me find out. Hold up. They broke it up differently. One second. One second. Did I say chapter 6? Yeah, chapter 6. At one of our trips to St. Kitts, that's where it starts at. It's in the 220, 230. All right. Yeah, 240. Thank you for your patience. We're at 240. My book is broken up a little differently. So if you scroll down to page 240, it should say, at one of our trips to St. Kitts, I had 11 bits of my own. That's where that's where we're up to section 4 at this point. So it's page 240. Hope that helps. And I'm going to continue. Oh, I think I lost it. Hold on one second. One second. Maybe I accidentally.
Hi, I'm Phil Mickelson. I've been fortunate to win on golf's biggest stages.
All right, you found it? Okay, 240. All right. So we're going to keep going here. At one of our trips to St. Kitts, I had 11 bits of my own, and my friendly captain lent me 5 more, with which I bought a Bible. I was very glad to get this book, which I could scarcely meet with anywhere. I think there were none sold in Montserrat, and much to my grief from being forced out of the Emunah in the manner I had related, my Bible and the Guide to the Indians, the 2 books I loved above all others, were left behind. Oh, chill, they got a book called The Guide to the Indians. That'll be interesting to read what they were writing up in there. While I was in St. Kitts, a very curious imposition on human nature took place. A white man wanted to marry in the church a free black woman that had land and slaves in Montserrat. Take note, because again, what are we doing here at the LEV Project for those who are new? We have been reading for the last 11 months narratives And this is a very good, interesting narrative, like they like to say, curious, because it's going into what I haven't touched on yet, which is slavery in the Caribbean, which he's describing pretty much like slavery in America. And so when I see these interesting points that we can use to broaden our scope of the experience so that we can have informed conversations and no longer just generalize things. And hopefully, the whole reason for it is to become a bit more familiarized with our past, and hopefully it will be able to heal or aid us in our healing process. And so he says a white man wanted to marry in the church a free black woman that had land and slaves in Montserrat. So again, they had free people in America, free people of melanated complexion in the islands. But the clergy told him it was against the law of the place to marry a white and black in the church. The man then asked to be married on the water, to which the parson consented, and the lovers went on board, and the parson and the clerk in another. And thus the ceremony was performed. And after this, the loving pair came on board our vessel, and my captain treated them extremely well and brought them safe to Montserrat. So they had intermarriage here. And this European wants to, she got land and stuff. So, very interesting. The reader cannot but judge of the irksomeness of this situation to a mind like mine, and being daily exposed to new hardship and impositions after having seen many better days, and been, as it were, in a state of freedom and plenty, added to which every part of the world in which I hitherto been seemed to me a paradise in comparison of the West Indies. My mind was therefore hourly replete with inventions and thoughts of being free, and if possible by honest and honorable means. For I always remember the old adage, and I trust that it has ever been my ruling principle that honesty is the best policy, and likewise that other golden principle, to do unto men as I would have them do unto me. However, as I was from early years a pedestrian, I thought whatever fate had determined must ever come to pass, and therefore if ever it were my lot to be free, nothing could prevent me, although I should at present see no means or hope to obtain my freedom. On the other hand, if it were my fate not to be free, I never should be so, and all my endeavors for that purpose will be fruitless. In the midst of these thoughts, I therefore looked up with prayers anxiously to God for my liberty, and at the same time used every honest means and did all that was possible on my part to obtain it. They said sugar mama. Yeah. He got a sugar mama, all right. Because I'm like, he's like, wait a minute. He's like, this is perplexing. You're a free melanated woman. Why would you marry a European? Keep in mind that they're the ones who are currently oppressing those who look like you. This was also the case in Santo Domingo or Haiti. This was also the case in Haiti. A lot of free individuals, and they also had slaves. So it again, a lot to learn. In process of time, I became master of a few pounds, and in a fair way of making more, which my friend Captain knew very well. This occasioned him sometimes to take liberties with me, but whenever he treated me, oh wow, that's a new word for me, washpishly. I know I gotta look that one up right. I used plainly to tell him my mind, and that I would die before I would be imposed upon as other Negroes were, and that to me life had lost to its relish when liberty was gone. And again, he thought he was going to be free, and I'm talking while I'm looking up Washpishli, or if that's even how you say it. He thought he was going to be free when the ship was paid for, when he was sailing. And so, when he got sold back into slavery, he lost all of that, optimism to a certain degree. Washpishli. It is waspishly, easily irritated or annoyed, it says. Indication of irritation, annoyance. All right. You looked it up as well. That's what Day. I'm that type of person like, hold on, let me look this up and see what this word means. It says here, This I said, although I foresaw my then well-being or future hopes of freedom, humanly speaking, depending on this man. However, as he could not bear the thought of my not sailing with him, he always became mild on my threats. I therefore continued with him, and from my great attention to his orders and his business, I gained him credit, and through his kindness to me, I at last procured my freedom. Very, very interesting. While I was thus went on, filled with the thoughts of freedom and resisting oppression, as well as I was able, my life hung daily in suspense, particularly in the surfs I have formerly mentioned, as I could not swim. These are extremely violent throughout the West Indies, and I was ever exposed to their howling rage and devouring fury in all the islands. I have seen them strike and toss a boat right up on end, and maim several on board. Once in Grenada Islands, when I and about 8 others were pulling a large boat with 2 puncheons of water in it, a surf struck us and drove the boat and all in it about half a stone's throw among some trees and above the high water mark. We were obliged to get all the assistance we could from the nearest estate to mend the boat and launch it into the water again. At Montserrat one night, in pressing hard to get off the shore on board, the punt was overset with us 4 times. The first time I was very near being drowned. However, the jacket I had on kept me above water a little time. While I called on a man near me who was a good swimmer and told him I could not swim, he then made haste to me, and just as I was sinking, he caught hold of me and brought me to sounding, and then he went and brought the punt also. As soon as we had turned the water out of her, lest we should be used ill for being absent, we attempted again 3 times more, and as often the horrid surfs served us as at first, but at last, the 5th time we attempted, we gained our point, and at the imminent hazard of our lives. One day also, at Old Road in Montserrat, our captain and 3 men besides him were going in a large canoe in a quest of rum and sugar, when a single surf tossed the canoe an amazing distance from the water, and some of us near a stone's throw from each other. Most of us were very much bruised, so that I and many more often said and really thought that there was not so much another place under the heavens as this. I longed therefore much to leave it, and daily wished to see my master's promise performed of going to Philadelphia. He wanted to leave the islands and go to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is cold. You know, he came from, where is he from? He's from Guinea. Is he from Guinea? He's an Igbo from northeast Nigeria, which is West Africa. And he's saying he's uncomfortable in the islands, which has a similar climate to West Africa. And he prefers to go, he preferred England, and he prefers now to go to Philadelphia. I guess in his estimation, this is going to make him free. So I'm going to read about 2 more segments, and then we shall continue. Oh no, now I'm just going to finish it out. Let's see. While we lay in this place, a very cruel thing happened on board of our sloop, which filled me with horror, though I found afterwards such practices were frequent. There was a very clever and decent, free young mulatto man who sailed a long time with us. He had a free woman for his wife, by whom he had a child, and she was living on shore, and all very happy. You know, that's not a usual thing. I had to say it like that because that's not a usual conversation right there. Well, again, he says they're free. So let's see. Our captain and mate and other people on board, and several elsewhere, even the natives of Bermudas, then with us, all knew this young man from a child that he was also free, or always free, and no one had ever claimed him as their property. However, as might too often overcomes right in these parts, it happened that a Bermudas captain whose vessel lay there for a few days in the road came on board of us, and seeing the mulatto man, whose name was Joseph Clipson, he told him he was not free, and that he had orders from his master to bring him to Bermudas. Same word. Boy, these people, boy, I tell you what. It's man stealing. The poor man could not believe the captain to be in earnest, but he was so very soon undeceived his men laying violent hands on him. And although he showed a certificate of him being free in St. Kitts, and most people on board knew that he served his time to boat building and also passed for a freeman, yet he was forcibly taken on our vessel. He then asked to be carried ashore before the secretary of the magistrates, and this infernal invaders of human rights promised him he should. But instead of that, they carried him on board of the other vessel, and the next day, without giving the poor man any hearing ashore, or suffering him even to see his wife or child, he was carried away, and probably be doomed nevermore in this world to see them again. Nor was this the only instance of this kind of barbarity to which I was a witness. I have since often seen in Jamaica and other islands free men whom I have known in America thus villainously trepanned and kept in bondage. I have heard of 2 similar practices even in Philadelphia, and were it not for the benevolence of Quakers in the city, many of the sable race, who now breathe the air of liberty, would I believe be groaning under some planter's chains. These things opened my mind to a new scene of horror to which I had been before a stranger. Hitherto I had thought only slavery dreadful, but the state of a free Negro appeared to me now equally so at least, and in some respects even worse, for they live in constant alarm for their liberty, but which is but nominal, and they are universally insulted and plundered without the possibility of redress. Such being the equity of West India law, that no free Negro's evidence would be admitted in their courts of justice. So you're free, but if they say you're not, then you're not. In this situation, it is surprising that slaves, when mildly treated, should prefer even the misery of slavery to such a mockery of freedom. I was now completely disgusted with the West Indies and thought I never should be entirely free till I had left them. With thoughts like these, my anxious, bounding mind recalled those pleasing scenes I had left behind, scenes where fair liberty in bright array make darkness bright and illuminous day. He got a surprise coming when he gets to America, where no complexion, wealth, nor station can protect the wretch who makes a slave of man. I determined to make every exertion to obtain my freedom and to return to Old England. For this purpose, I thought a knowledge of navigation might be of use to me. For though I did not intend to run away unless I should be ill-used, yet in such a case, if I understood navigation, I might attempt my escape in our sloop, which was one of the swiftest sailing vessels in the West Indies, and I could be at no loss for hands to join me. Had I made this attempt, I had intended to go to her to England, but this, as I said, was only to be in the event of my meeting with an ill usage. I therefore employed the mate of our vessel to teach me navigation, for which I agreed to give him $24, and actually paid him part of the money down, though when the captain some time after came to know that the mate was to have such a sum for teaching me, he rebuked him and said it was a shame for him to take any money from me. However, my progress in this useful art was much retarded by the constancy of our work. I'm gonna read one more. Had I wished to run away, I did not want opportunities which frequently presented themselves, and particularly at one time. Soon after this, when we were in the island of Guadeloupe, there were a large fleet of merchants bound for old France, and seamen then being very scarce, they gave from 15 to 20 pounds a man for the run. Our mate and all the white sailors left our vessels on this account and went abroad the French ships. They would have had me also to go with them, for they regarded me and swore to protect me if I would go. And as the fleet was to sail the next day, I really believe I could have got a safe to Europe at that time. However, as my master was kind, I would not attempt to leave him, still remembering the old maxim, the honesty is the best policy. Hold on one second. I suffered them to go without me. Indeed, my captain was much afraid of my leaving him in the vessel at the time, and as I had so fear an opportunity. But I thank God that this fidelity of mine turned out much to my advantage hereafter, when I did not in the least think of it, and made me so much in favor with the captain that he used now and then to teach me some parts of navigation himself. But some of our passengers and others, seeing this, found much fault with him for it, saying it was a very dangerous thing to let a Negro know navigation, and thus I was hindered again to my pursuits. So not only did they want you in slavery, it's just like, it's, you know, have the Negro learning to read, all of these things is to keep you in that state. About the latter end of the year 1764, my master brought a larger sloop called the Prudence, about 70 or 80 tons, of which my captain had the command. I went with him into his vessel, or this vessel, and we took a load of new slaves from Georgia and Charlestown. Oh, he took a new load for Georgia and Charlestown. My master now left me entirely to the captain, though he still wished me to be with him. But I, who always much wished to lose sight of the West Indies, was not a little rejoiced at the thoughts of seeing any other country. Therefore, relying on the goodness of my captain, I got ready all the little venture I could. And when the vessel was ready, we sailed to my great joy. Great joy, when you don't know what lays on the other side, no more. When we got to our predestined places, Georgia and Charleston, that's what happens. I expected I should have an opportunity of selling my little property to advantage, but here, particularly in Charleston, or Charleston, South Carolina, I met with buyers, white men, who imposed on me as in other places. Notwithstanding, I was resolved to have fortitude, thinking no lot or trial was too hard when kind heaven is the rewarder. We soon got loaded again and returned to Montserrat. And there amongst the rest of the islands, I sold my goods well. And in this manner, I continued trading during the year of 1764, meeting with various scenes of impositions as usual. After this, my master fitted out his vessel for Philadelphia in the year of 1765. And during the time of loading her and getting ready for the voyage, I worked with double alacrity. What is this? Another word for me to look up. Alacrity, A-L-A. Uh-oh, hold on 1 second. The word is cheerful willingness and eagerness.
Alacrity.
Alacrity. There we go.
Alacrity.
It said where am I? He worked with great alacrity, eh? So he was joyful and glad. He's like, yeah, we're getting out of here. Okay. And he goes on to say, from the hope of getting money enough by these voyages to buy my freedom in time, if it should please G.O.D., and also to see the city of Philadelphia, having heard a great deal about it from some years past, besides which I had always longed to prove my master's promise the first day I came to him. In the midst of these elevated ideas, and while I was about getting my little merchandise in readiness, one Sunday my master sent for me to his house. When I came there, I found him and the captain together, and on my going in, I was struck with astonishment at his telling me he heard that I meant to run away from him when I got to Philadelphia. And therefore, said he, I must sell you again. You cost me a great deal of money, no less than 40 pounds sterling, and it will not do to lose so much. You're a valuable fellow, continued he. So this is the second time this thing happens to him now. And I can any day get for you 100 guineas for many gentlemen in this island. And then he told me of Captain Doran's brother-in-law, a severe master, who ever wanted to buy me to make me his overseer. My captain also said he would get much more than 100 guineas for me in Carolina. This I knew to be a fact, for the gentleman that wanted to buy me came off several times on board of us and spoke to me to live with him and said he would use me well. When I asked to what work he would put me, he said, as I was a sailor, he would make me a captain of his rice vessels. But I refused, and fearing at the same time by sudden turn I saw in the captain's temper he might mean to sell me, I told the gentleman I would not live with him on any condition, and that I certainly would run away with his vessel, But he said he did not fear that, as he would catch me again. And then he told me how cruelly he would serve me if I should do so. My captain, however, gave him to understand that I knew something of navigation, so he thought better of it. And to my great joy, he went away. I now told my master I did not say I would run away in Philadelphia, neither did I mean it, as he did not use me ill, nor yet the captain, for if they did, I certainly would have made some attempts before now. But as I thought that if it were God's will I ever should be freed, it would be so. And on the contrary, if it was not his will, it would not be or happen. So I hoped if ever I were freed, whilst I was used well, it should be by honest means. But as I could not help myself, he must do as he pleased. I could only hope and trust in God of heaven, and at that instant my mind was big with inventions and full of schemes to escape. I then appealed to the captain whether he ever saw any sign of me making the least attempt to run away, and asked him if I did not always come on board according to the time for which he gave me liberty, and more particularly when all our men left us at Guadeloupe and went on board the French fleet, and advised me to go with them, whether I might not, and that he could not have got me again. To my no small surprise and very great joy, the captain confirmed every syllable I said, and even more, for he said he had tried different times to see if I would make any attempt of this kind, both at St. Eustatia and in America, and he never found that I made the smallest, but on the contrary, I always came on board according to his orders. And he did really believe if I ever meant to run away, that as I could never have had a better opportunity, I would have done it the night the mate and all the people left our vessel at Guadeloupe. The captain then informed my master, who had been thus imposed on by our mate, though I did not know who was my enemy, the reason the mate had for imposing this lie upon him, which was because I had acquainted the captain with the provisions the mate had given away or taken out of the vessel. This speech of the captain was like life to dead to me, and instantly my soul glorified God, and still more on hearing my master immediately say that I was a sensible fellow, and he never did intend to use me as a common slave, and that by for the entreaties of the captain and his character of me, he would not have let me go from the stores about as I had done. And also in so doing, he thought by carrying on little thing or other to different places to sell, I might make money. That he intended to encourage me in this by crediting me with half of the puncheon of rum and half a hogshead of sugar at a time, so that from being careful I might have money enough in some time to purchase my freedom. And that was the case. I might depend upon it, he would let me have it for 40 pounds sterling, which was the only same price he gave for me. This gladdened my poor heart beyond measure, though indeed it was no more than the idea I had formed in my mind of my master long before. And I immediately made him his reply: Sir, I have always had that very thought of you, indeed I had, and that made me so delight in serving you. He then gave me a large piece of silver coin, such as I had never seen or have ever had before, and told me to get ready for the voyage, and he would credit me with a tirance of sugar and another of rum. He also said he had 2 amiable sisters in Philadelphia from whom I might get some necessary things. Upon this, my noble captain desired me to go aboard, and knowing the African metal, he charged me not to say anything of this matter to anybody, and he promised that the lying mate should not go with him anymore. And so at this point, we are up to section 7. So when we come back again, we're going to finish up section 7 and see if they really do it this time. They've been, this is not the first time this has happened to him. And they say in other narratives that the word of the master means nothing to the slave. So we will believe it when we see it. How about that? For those who just joined us, thank you for tuning in. This is Emunah of the LEV Project. Thank you for wading through the water. Up until this point, we're going to continue, most high willing, till December. And at that point, I'm going to take a break, well-earned, well-earned break, well-needed break. And the power is within us to just do something just as simple as reading collectively, reading aloud. It helps in so many ways to bridge this gap and open up, you know, the annals of history, and to remember the things that we've lost along the way. That's going to help us. So for everybody who has supported, and thank you, Sister Angel. Sister Angel supports always from the very beginning of this reading. And, you know, 12 months, Sister Angel, you're going to be like the key testimony person, because you definitely can show and share how this has helped you. I know it's helped me tremendously. And hopefully, you know, there'll probably be those who come along the way later on. And, you know, we're just leaving it so that others can benefit from this work. So just call it community service, you know, community service. So with that said, we'll be back again, picking up at that portion in the book next time. And hopefully I won't take so long. Maybe I'll try to come on. I always say that. I'm not even going to say when I'm going to try to come on. Just look for the notification, because it's kind of difficult. But again, everybody have a blessed night, and thank you for tuning. Oh, yeah, we have a show. Huge blessing, huge blessing, huge blessing. We have a show tomorrow, finishing up on this relationship series here out of the book Women Lead, Man Leads, Women Follows, Everybody Wins. And so tune in tomorrow. I think that's tomorrow at 9, if I'm not mistaken. Tune in tomorrow at 9, and we can follow up on that. So until next time, I'm very tired of Moon and Yisrael signing off. Lala Tov. Good night, everyone.